So what is a design sprint? Probably an important question to tackle right now. Let's start here with this book by Knapp. So Knapp was working at Google. They were trying to tackle some significant problems and they were finding that they were just getting stuck in a quagmire, not really making progress. So Jake and his colleagues developed a 5-day process for dealing with a problem and taking it right through in that 5 days to a prototype and a test. So they had real answers from real people by the end of the week. So after using the design sprint process with his own team, Jake also used it with other organizations. Since then, that 5-day process has been streamlined by other organizations into around about 4 days. So what does that 4 days typically look like for a design sprint? After a couple of client meetings where you really understand what you're trying to tackle, the facilitator will set up 4 days. On the Monday, a team of about 6 to 8 people will come together and have a look at understanding the challenge. And they'll do that in a number of different ways. So there's an activity where you look at what already exists. You also want to set out what's the long-term goal? What does this look like in 2 years' time? And you also want to set out some sprint questions. Like, can we improve the lunch crew process for students? Can we redesign the curriculum for an ever-changing world? Things like that. Once you've established those, you can then start to drill down into the detail and then start to come up with how might we's. So how might we develop How might we change things for the better? And when you've got those, there's then a process called the map. So you have a think about who's involved, how are they going to discover this new solution, how are they going to tackle this new problem, and what's it going to look like when they use this solution and come out the other end. That then allows the whole team to then go away and come up with ideas called solution sketches. So by the end of day one, you've drilled into the problem and you've got a bunch of solutions from the whole team. And that's a really important part about the sprint. It's not one person's idea. And also, you're looking at each idea as anonymous. So you're not wedded to your own idea and you can kill it if you need to. So then we're into day 2. So those solutions that everyone's created are going to be voted on and you're going to take 1 or 2 forward into the process of eventually prototyping and testing them. So after everyone's voted, then you will take forward 1 or 2 solutions and they will be storyboarded. So you're going to think about how can we take this solution and prototype it on day 3. So the prototyping process needs to be storyboarded out. So the team will come together and think about a series of about 6 or 7 steps that would allow you to bring in a real person, expose them to your idea and solution, and see what they think. So by the end of day 2, you have also got a storyboard ready to prototype. So that brings us to day 3. So you've picked a solution, you've storyboarded it, and then on day 3, about 2 or 3 people will prototype it, build a prototype for that particular solution. Now in some cases that can be a rather sort of technical wireframe of an app or a website. But in a lot of cases, particularly in schools that I work with, the low fidelity versions work really well. So it might be a paper-based version of a site or an app that you want to develop and someone just has to prod at the paper and you bring in the next scene. Or it might be a sort of Lego scene of a classroom to sort of show what is possible without obviously having to redesign a whole classroom. So on that 3rd day, that prototype is built, ready for testing on day 4. Now in the background for sprints, someone will be looking at what the solutions are and who are the people that these solutions are aimed at. And the aim is on day 4 to bring in some real people for the test. So there's a little bit of recruitment going on in the background and something you might want to bear in mind when you're thinking about the testing process. Who do you need? Do you need students? Do you need teachers? Do you need parents? And where might you get those from? And that's where you can really use a colleague or 2 just to go and do a bit of ringing parents or identifying a few students who are available. So that brings us to day 4, the test. You've got your prototype for one of the solutions you came up with on day 1 and you're going to put it in front of about 5 real people. And you're not going to try and overly explain it to them. You just want to put it in front of them, ask them to interact with it, and observe what they do and what they say. And you want to elicit out of them a kind of commentary of what they're thinking as they go. So if you can get them to go, I see that I can move this here, but I'm not quite sure why I'd want to engage with that bit. This bit's a bit confusing. I'm thinking I might do this, but I'm not entirely sure. And rather than trying to go, no, let me explain it to you, you sit back, take that feedback and put that into the process. And that's your 4-day sprint. From day 1, you've got a problem. At the end of day 1, you've got a solution. At the end of day 2, you have got an idea of a storyboard for a prototype. At the end of day 3, you have a prototype. And the end of day 4, you've tested. Now for the facilitator, there's a process of taking those findings and putting together a sprint review. And often what I'll suggest to the people I work with is that we do 2 sprints. So after that first sprint, we learn what we've learned and we do an iteration sprint. So you repeat the process, building on what you had before. So that's the design sprint process. 5 or 4 days, and from idea to test. But that's not always going to work for schools. So how can we take this process for rapidly coming up with solutions to big problems or improving existing ones in a school day? And that's what we'll look at next.